I want to talk about something that happened earlier this week. And to do that, I want to bring our first guest on. John Best, of course, is the publisher of the Bay Observer, and he does our Friday sessions every Friday to talk about politics, especially at the local and provincial levels here in Ontario. John, so glad of you, so happy rather that you could join us on the program. Thanks for being with us here today.
Well, I'm glad to be with you, Bill.
You're a veteran journalist. You've been doing this for a long, long time. You've run newsrooms. You've been a reporter. You've done an awful lot of stuff in that way. And I look at the people that do journalism well as people that are essentially serving the public in the same way that elected officials are, except you don't get paid as much as elected officials. But what I saw this week is something that really bothered me, and we've had a discussion about this in the past, about the way that journalism and journalists in particular seem to be victims right now and targets, certainly on social media, and by some elected officials. I mean, Donald Trump is the classic example of that, the way he went after a number of different journalists, Jim Acosta from CNN, Brian Kerman, who I have on the show many times too, actually got his press credentials taken away from him. And we thought, well, that's Trump. That's never going to happen here. Well, it's starting to happen, and frankly, it's happening with Pierre Poilievre. The other day, of course, the accusations about, well, there weren't not more than accusations. The attacks he had against Global News' Rachel Gilmore, and then on social media he carried that on. But there was an incident earlier this week, just a couple of days ago, and I'm sure you've seen it, John, and it was Global News Ottawa correspondent David Akin and Pierre Poilievre. And well, let me play the clip, and then I want to get your response to it. This is a little bit of what happened. Just to set this up now, Poilievre had called a press conference. And you get a few minutes, a few hours notice, depending on who it is. And you've seen this in the background. Of course, the cameras are all set up, and the reporters are in there behind the cameras. And usually the politician will make a statement, and then there's usually a Q&A after that, so we can get down to exactly what the story is and why, et cetera, et cetera. And just before Poilievre stepped to the microphone, his assistant said there's going to be no questions today, which caused an awful lot of people, including David Akin, to say, well, why are we here then? And so Akin decided, I'm going to ask questions anyway. If you're not going to allow them, I'm going to ask them because that's what I'm here for, and that's what people want to hear. So here's a little bit of that exchange between Poilievre and David Akin.
So, I mean, we have basically a liberal heckler who snuck in here today to, well, right. Are you going to let me make my misstatement?
From the guy who actually reported first on the Prime Minister breaking the law.
Yeah. Are you going to let me make my statement?
Ask a question. Say, yes,
I've actually never seen you heckling the Prime Minister.
Ask Minister
I've never seen you
Baird
heckling the Prime Minister. Look, bottom line is this.
I'm going to take some questions at the end of the statement.
Yes, I will be taking two questions at the very end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to start my statement again, and hopefully this time without interruption from the Liberal heckling gathering here, and we'll speak directly to Canadians so that they can hear what the new Leader of the Opposition has to say.
So there it was. Your reaction, John. I mean, you've heard this. I'm sure you've seen variations on this theme, but this was rather egregious. What were your thoughts?
Well, it's never good when a reporter is yelling at anybody. Yelling. If you're yelling at the president as he's boarding the helicopter, that's because the helicopter is noisy. But it's never good when a reporter loses it because, in a way, they're starting to march in the parade they're covering. Although, if you really look at it from a practical standpoint, the aide said there'd be no questions, and in the middle of that exchange, Poilievre agreed to two questions. So, in a way, the Akin thing sort of worked. Think about David Akin, as was pointed out in a column today. He's not a left-wing, bleeding heart liberal by any means. I mean, he was one of the first people to work for that Sun TV channel. So he's no toady for Prime Minister Trudeau, but it kind of shows the deterioration between the media and politics, where a politician could even think that they could simply read a statement and not take questions. To some degree, what it shows is that the politicians don't believe that the media are as much of a factor as they used to be. And I think you're seeing that everywhere. And I think you're even seeing it here locally. The media are simply not, particularly when they're expressing opinions, they're simply not the leader. They're not playing that leadership role that they would have played 20, 30 years ago when endorsements by the media were so important to politicians.
Well, and you're right, it does happen here. I mean, I've been doing this program for a number of years right now, and it's come to my attention, although nobody's ever said it to my face, that there are some people on city council and certainly a lot of staff members who would never come on this program because they don't want to be answering questions. That's all there is to it. They want to make their statements, and they don't want any further discussion about that. And that's, that's fine. If they're going to be that way. But that doesn't mean, if they're going to talk with me, it doesn't mean I can't talk about them, but in situations like that. But you and I have both experienced that, and we get over it. I should mention, by the way, for those who may not know, Aiken did apologize for his behavior a little bit later on. He just said, I was just angry. I was upset. He was quoted, I talked to a number of people that were in the room with him when this whole thing happened. And when he was told, or the media was told that the Polyev wasn't going to ask questions, they were just there. He says, I'm not an effing stenographer, meaning, I'm here to report. I want to ask questions. He said that to the press secretary, not to Polyev himself. But what bothers me about this is, first of all, the exchange. Second, to your point, that they don't want to be accountable and they don't want to ask questions. But most importantly, as Ruth Arthur wrote in the Toronto Star yesterday, what happened afterwards was even more egregious because both Polyev and his press guy went on social media and basically said that Aiken was swearing at them and cursing at them. And that didn't happen. It didn't happen. It even bothered me that he said a liberal heckler. Pierre Polyev knows damn well who David Aiken is. To characterize him as a liberal heckler, not even call him by name, it's a gross miscarriage of the power that people in the elected office have, and it's basically another situation. Okay, it's the Trump matter. The press are evil, so let's demonize the press.
Well, it is, and to be honest, we've reached a point in civil discourse now where the message will resonate. Polyev didn't get elected leader of the party because he was demonstrating any kind of liberal tendency. So there will be a large contingent of his supporters who will agree with him that the media are biased. And frankly, if you look at public opinion polls, there's a lot of skepticism about the media. It's way down on the list of respected professions. The politicians and the media are really wallowing at the bottom end of the scale, and I don't know where it ends. I think for those of us who care about journalism, the only thing you can do, and it's not very sexy, but the only thing you can do is just try to be as straightforward as you can be. What do they call it? The first cut at history, and try to stay out of the personalization of stuff, and just be a decent, clean journalist that tries to tell the truth. And, that's not fun because you have to do it day in and day out. And then you still at times will be accused of bias. So it's a tough time right now to be in journalism, but it's also a tough time to be in politics. And frankly, both professions have become somewhat trivialized over the last 10 years.
Well, and I think there are people that will feed that fire, and I think that's what causes part of the problem. There are some people in elected office who just really want to sidestep any kind of accountability. I mean, and we've seen that happen more and more, and the easiest way to do that is to demonize the people that are asking the questions. And it's not just Trump that did it or Pierre Polyev that done it. An awful lot of people do it these days. And it's frustrating because they feel that, I can sidestep. I don't have to be accountable. I can just go on social media and say whatever the hell I want, and it doesn't matter if it's fact-based or not. And the people that like me are going to eat it up. The others are going to ignore me, but that's fine. What they're doing is playing to their crowd, and it's a lot easier now because they have that alternative right now. You don't have to be accountable. You don't have to ask questions. I mean, the basic tenets in journalism. I learned this thing day one in school way back when. Was the 5 questions: who, what, when, where, why. That's the basis of any news story. You know, who's doing it, why they're doing it, where they're doing it, what's going to happen. That's it. And that, in other words, you're trying to get a story. You're trying to get the facts here. And they don't want to necessarily do that.
Well, the other problem here, Bill, is the sort of now the backdrop for everything we do, both in the news media and in politics, is social media. And it has so coarsened the public dialogue now that people feel safe yelling obscenities through social media at reporters, threatening language, but also towards politicians. I mean, we've had a number of, here locally, we've had a number of politicians who have chosen not to run again. And when I look at the list of those who have chosen not to run again, quite frankly, I think every one of them probably would have been reelected. So they weren't running away from defeat, but a number of them have said that what they see on social media, and I've talked to many politicians who simply say, I cannot actually look at my social media account because the comments that come through are so terrible. So social media is now the backdrop, and people that are trying to do real journalism or real politics with that going on in the background, it's become a coarse, hostile, nasty environment that we're trying to do our jobs in.
And I get that. I mean, hey, I'm highlighting a couple of politicians that use this, I think, in all the wrong, or maybe the word is abuse, not use. And you're right. I mean, politicians have become victims of this as well. We've seen examples of that. We've talked about that as well. But it's a totally, skewed system right now. I keep thinking about that Jack Nicholson line, in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Nobody wants to hear the truth these days. They just want to hear, what they want to believe in. My commentary on C.H. Miller this morning, I quoted the classic line from Andy Rooney, who was the commentator on 60 Minutes for so many years. And he said, people will generally accept facts as truth, but only if those facts agree with what they already believe. And that's somewhat cynical, but I think there's a truism there, and I think it's really shown in what you've just described over the last little while.
Well, and Rooney's comments were 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd recognize the world today. So there's a lot going on, and it's diminished us all. Paul, you look at a guy like Pierre Poilievre. He's never done anything. He's never cashed a check in his life that didn't have a government coat of arms on it. Career politician from his teens. And that doesn't mean that he couldn't be useful, but you're looking at a man who sees the world through has never been out of the bubble, frankly, and to some degree that's the same thing with Trudeau. They've always lived in and around politics all their life. The days of somebody having a distinguished career in business and then deciding to donate themselves, if you will, and their expertise and their experience to maybe a couple of terms in office, those days are gone. The caliber of cabinet ministers is very much diminished. They used, it used to be a big deal if a cabinet minister came to town with an announcement, but now they're just shills for the PMO, and they're from the standpoint of policy or running departments. It's very difficult to take them seriously. But similarly, we're in the media, because social media is called media. The media have taken an awful hit in terms of its credibility, even though our newspapers are still trying to do their best. Television news in Canada, at least, is largely factual. It's not like the United States, where you've got 3 channels that are nothing but opinion. So, it's just a tough time to be in either game. That would be my summation of the current situation.
Yeah, and I know we're just about out of time, but and for those who will decry, mainstream media, what mainstream media gives people is a variety of opinions and choices, but facts are facts. How many times have you heard criticism about CBC? There are conservative right-wing voices on CBC, a lot of them. And there are newspapers that will print that sort of stuff too. We've got a variety here. What social media does is it gives you the opportunity to be able to filter out anything that you don't want to hear because you disagree with it, and just concentrate on what you've got. And I think we're all the worse for it because of that perspective that people take. Anyway, we got to run. John, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for the conversation today. Have a great weekend. We'll talk again soon.
You too, Bill. Good to be with you.
You betcha. John Best from the Bay Observer.